What's up, Erica? Welcome back to the Alpha Girl Confidence podcast. Super excited to have you on. When I reached out and asked you to come on, and you were like, let's talk about social media and the upsides and downsides. Like, I was super, super stoked to talk about it because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. So, for you, like, what are you noticing with your athletes, or maybe just in general with social media? Like, what are some of the big things that are coming up that really made you want to come on and talk about this topic?
Well, how much time do we have? Because there's there's a lot that I've noticed and that I've even just seen unfold in even the past few years. So I'll start with this. I started to notice more issues during the COVID times
Yeah.
because I think when that was going on, we had a lot of extra time to be on technology, and the world was also getting really divisive. So people are very attracted to like negative things and crazy stories. So that didn't really help with what we were paying attention to. And we kind of all just got stuck in this rabbit hole of constantly being online and being charged up by things going on in the world. And what I saw with a lot of my athletes and even with my closest family and friends, and this isn't meant to be a commentary on what side you were on or not.
Right.
That's not where I'm going at all with this. But what I did notice was people got really divisive and just nasty because it's much easier to be a mean person when you're hiding behind a keyboard and you're making a comment to someone personally on their account, or you're DMing them and being like, well, why are you posting about this? And I saw that a lot with my girls. And they even told me during that time that they lost friendships.
Yeah.
And that just broke my heart because it's not real life to always agree with people on things and
Yeah.
for us to think the same on everything. And I think it's so bad for youth because we're not teaching them how to have conversations, to be compassionate, to listen. They're just kind of being told like what to think and what to post about, or they need to post what their friends are posting about, and they need to be just as excited about something as their friends. And that's where it kind of all started for me. And that's where it raised a red flag. And I don't think it's gotten better since then. I
No.
think people are still in that mindset of, oh, well, I'm just going to be with the people who I always agree with, and I'm not going to even like hear people out. And there's really no like conversation or forgiveness in the world. And that's been big for me. And I don't think it's good for youth athletes. I think adults are also the worst at it. Even myself, I wasn't perfect, but yeah, that's really what I noticed. I know that's kind of starting off with a bang, but what
Yeah,
have you
let's
noticed
let's
since
do
that
it.
time?
I mean, here's the thing is that a lot of people don't realize, and the reason why I know this is because I read a lot of books around technology, social media. And what people don't realize is that, especially in those divisive times, the reason why you saw those more is because the people who were controlling technology make you want, they show that more because it is more addictive. The highs are more addictive than the lows. It gets that hit of dopamine, and that's where you start to go down the rabbit hole. And so there's even this article that I read, and I pulled a quote out of it because I think it's so powerful, and I shared it with my email list and my Facebook group. And in these like high like social media age, right, it says that nearly, and this is like new research, that nearly 1 in 3 high school girls said that they had considered suicide. 1 in 3, which is a 60% rise in the last decade. Well, like, what's happened in the last decade? Like, it's the social media age, right? And then 6 out of 10 were so persistently sad or hopeless that they stopped regular activities. And I think a lot of that is to your point of like the social thing. Like, they don't know how to, and when I say they, it's like, I think everybody, but especially teenagers, like, don't know how to have conversations, face-to-face conversations anymore, because everything is like done in a screen, Snapchat, TikTok, text messaging, like all of those things. And there's so many different ways we could go with this conversation. But like, let's start with, I actually kind of want to start with some of the upsides. let's start with the upsides of social media, because it's not all bad. Technology isn't all bad. There's some really great things about it. And then we'll kind of get into more of like the downsides and what we can do about those downsides. So for you, like, what do you see as some of the benefits and upsides, if you see any?
Absolutely. I think it's good we're touching on this because there are definitely a lot of upsides. And I think it's a really great tool to connect with people you never could have met in your life before. So for a young athlete, maybe you made a friend online who's also a soccer player or another athlete, and you developed a relationship with them, or they're motivating you to get out and work out or revamp your nutrition, whatever that may be. Maybe you discovered a registered dietitian online who you can work with. I mean, I think there's so many benefits for young athletes in that sense, to really be motivated by other girls and also to get education from great professionals that you never would have had access to. I work with a few girls in like the Midwest, in like Oklahoma and Kansas remotely, because they don't have access to a performance facility in their town. So it's beneficial for that as well. For me, from a professional standpoint, I mean, I've met great people like you and just colleagues that I can learn from, because my focus is performance training, but I want to learn from people who are doing mental training, nutrition, recovery, sports psychology. And it's been really great for continuing education.
Yeah.
And, you know, I rarely attend conferences anymore just because it's very costly with time and money. And I'm more so focused on building good relationships with my colleagues, and just like becoming friends with just people smarter than myself and where we can all learn from each other. So it's been really good in that sense. And I think it is important for people to recognize what the positives are and
Yeah.
to focus more on those, because it is easy to get distracted. And the stats that you just read off with the suicide and the mental health, I heard that in another podcast actually earlier today. And it is very alarming. And you're right. The common denominator has been in the past decade, the introduction of social media. So that definitely has played a part.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that's the thing, is like, I don't want this to just be like we're bashing social media. Like, there are some great things. Like, you and I would have never met had there not been social media. Like, almost all of my guests on my podcast, I met them through social media. There's a lot of education that you can get from social media, but it's about your intent. Like, when you get on social media, what is your intent? Is your intent to just like waste time and numb your feelings? Or is your intent to go on and learn something and connect with someone? Like, I think intent is a really big key to this whole thing. And also your awareness of how social media is affecting you. Because if you aren't aware of how it's affecting you and you don't know what it's doing to your brain and your hormones, then you're just kind of like a robot in the whole system. That's kind of how I see it. You're just a robot in Facebooks and Instagrams and TikTok system, and you're just a user. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think it's so important to, number one, have the right intention. If you're going to use social media, and also be aware of like how it actually affects your physiology, which is huge. So as far as, okay, so there's a couple upsides, obviously. We could probably talk for hours about the downsides, but what for you are some of the specific downsides you see for teenage girl athletes?
Well, the first one is I don't like the divisiveness. And I've noticed that it's a lot of groupthink, you know,
Yeah,
no matter what you believe in. And
absolutely.
there's just a lack of independent thought and individuality. And every girl is kind of just reposting what their friends reposting. And, you know, it might feel good to repost about something you're amped up about or a certain issue going on. But it's like, also, if you're wanting to change the world and make a difference, instead of posting about it, why don't you go out and do something? Go out and create something, take responsibility for your life. You know,
Mhm.
I think everyone thinks they're saving the world by posting stuff on social media, even myself at times in the past.
Sure.
But it's
Yeah.
like, how are you making a difference in your community? How are you touching the lives of people in person?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one thing you mentioned earlier is like the mindlessness thing. it's so mindless to just repost something or to just blast out short form content. And it's mindless for the consumer too, right?
So true.
Like
So
it's
true.
just
Yeah.
like they get caught scrolling and then 2 hours goes by and they're like, wait, what was I just doing for the
Yeah.
past two
And they
hours when
didn't,
I
and they have no clue what they were actually, like, they couldn't go back and say like, oh, this helped me or that I consume this. Cause it is mindless. Like you said, that's a great point.
yeah, it's mindless. And I think that kind of ties back to just the alarming rates of suicidal thoughts and depression. It's like if you have mindlessness and no meaning in your life, that's when things take a really bad turn for your mental health. And meaning is really just getting out there and serving the world. And that's like essentially where we get meaning from. It's not from like us like, doing stuff for like me and ourselves. It's no,
For
actually
sure.
like getting out and like who are we serving? So if you're a young athlete, how are you making your teammates better? How are you making their day? How are you helping your friends? Or even how are you respecting your own parents? It's just like I think there's an unchecked narcissism that can happen in social media.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
And
For sure.
everyone's guilty of
Yeah.
narcissism to some degree.
Mhm.
But some, there's some cases more extreme than others. And I don't think social media helps with making that better. Because
No.
it's very me focused, like my platform, my brand, my highlight reels, me dancing and pointing at things, like I obviously have a lot to say about social media, but I think it definitely takes us away from true meaning at times.
Yeah. I mean, I think it takes us away from our true selves, to be honest, which is the ultimate
Yep.
thing is like, if it's something is taking away from your true self, it's probably not very helpful. And what you said, like, with like the group think thing, I think that's so powerful. And I don't want to like skip over that.
Mhm.
And I think a quote that I heard was like, the more you consume, the less you create. Right. And I full heartedly believe that if you're consuming all the time, the less you're creating, whatever create means to you. If that means, like for us, it's obviously like creating, programs and content and creating things that make a difference in the world. But for an athlete, whatever create means to you, but the more you consume, the less you create. The more you consume and face externally, the less you're going to be able to face internally. Like it just takes your perception and your awareness away from yourself, which, if you're trying to be confident, if you're trying to be the best human that you possibly can be, that's not the way to do it. The way to do that is to go inside. And when you're on social media, that's the last thing you're doing is going inside.
Yeah, you're just too distracted at that point, and it's just taking you away from what you need to do and the responsibility that you need to carry in life. And for youth, it's like, okay, well, if you want to become a better athlete, then maybe get off and maybe start learning how to cook. Maybe
Yeah.
bond with your parents and cook a healthy family meal. Maybe learn how to strength train. Maybe go for a walk outside and do some active recovery. Is that better use of your
Yeah.
time? And I'd argue it absolutely is. And I think people need to just be aware of when social media is taking away from that, taking away
Absolutely.
from that responsibility for your life as an athlete.
Here's a thought or a question that maybe athletes can ask themselves or anybody, like, how, if they're on social media, how can this social media, how is it making me better? Can you answer, like, is it making you better? Can you answer yes to that? So the only way I could possibly see that it's making someone better is if they're, example, going to your page, looking at an exercise or something, and then go doing it immediately. You know what I mean? But like, ask yourself when you're getting on, like, is this helping me to be a better human? Is this helping me to be a better athlete? If not, like, we're not saying don't ever use it, but like, just be really aware of what you're doing when you're on there and how you're using that information. Because if you consume all of my stuff, all of Erica's stuff, but then you just go keep scrolling and you don't do anything with it, it's not going to help you. So again,
Right.
kind of going back to the intention thing, but what you said just like brought up this question of like, is this actually helping me? And along with that, one, again, in another book, I read a lot of books around this, but in another book I read, It was talking about before you get on your phone, ask the three questions. And I think hopefully I remember them. It's, hang on, give me a sec. What for is one question. Okay. So before you get on your phone, what for, why now, and what else? So what are you getting on social media for? What for, why now? Why does it need to be done now? And what else could you be doing? So I think those are three powerful questions before you even get on your phone or get on social media, to like be real intentional with what you're doing on your phone.
Intention is such a huge one. And I think it's so important to get into this a little bit more. But you said that, people can look at our short form content, like maybe I post an exercise, or you post like a little nugget on mental training, but it's like, are you just quickly consuming that information, or are you taking action and really leveling up your life? And I don't know about you, Shay, but I've kind of taken a step back from short form content and just really focused on long form, deep dive where people can like really learn about a topic and get good at it. I just found that with like the short reels and the dancing, they became more of entertainment for people, and they weren't really taking action. And I think there's a big difference between consuming information and making a transformation. And if you want a transformation in your life, I don't think short form content consumption is going to do it. You might have gotten like a good nugget from someone saying something and been like, oh, I never really thought about that. But like, did you like really change your life watching that reel or TikTok?
Yeah.
And that's something I've been wrestling with recently, because back a few months ago, I was constantly posting reels.
Right.
And it was like a little experiment. And there was actually not that much engagement. But now with the long form content, people are like, oh my gosh, like I never learned so deeply about something, and like we're ready to like make a change.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, but that makes a lot of sense. And I think people still crave in-depth content and also coaching. I think there's going to be a big need for coaches and accountability as well.
I really, really love this, Erica, because I would say I am not good at social media. Like, I don't love it. And I don't ever get like crazy engagement, but like what the experts will say is do short form content. So I had been doing more short form, like with the cool captions and the like the 30, 40, 50-second stuff. And I've been doing that more. But now that we're having this conversation, I'm like, well, why am I doing it? Am I doing it to get more engagement? Sure, I absolutely was. I can be honest. Was it changing anyone's life? Probably not. So it's like in my heart, it's like I would rather have a long thing that one person watches and it transforms their life than have a million people watch this short form viral piece of content that makes me feel good about myself. So this is, I love this, what you just said for me and how I use social media and create content on social media. So this is a very selfish segment of the episode. So thank you for that.
Of course. Well, we can even relate it to youth as well, but in like the college recruiting space, I think a lot of young athletes think they need to post like these flashy highlight reels from their games. And look, I think it's great that you're sharing your wins and your highlights. That's awesome. But a lot of college coaches want you to build relationships with them, know how to send a good email. They want you getting out to an ID camp or reaching out about a showcase. That's more of where they're going to find athletes. Right. And if players just put their focus on those things, instead of just getting this volume of content and taking all this time, then they're going to have a much better chance of getting recruited. And I used to recruit and I hated when people tagged me. It's just, it was just too like, okay, like they're interested in my school, but it's like so impersonal. So I think this can help young athletes. You don't need to just blast out all this content and like create a brand and like market yourself. Get out, just become a good player, like do your workouts, revamp your nutrition, play well at showcases, work hard in practices. That's really what you need to do.
I love this because here's the thing is, what are more people doing? More people are creating flashy highlight reels. More people are like building their brand on social media. So if you want to stand out and you really want to be seen by a coach, go old school. You know what I mean? Like in a sense, like go old school, just get in and do the work and create relationships, because the reality is that some 30-second highlight reel, like a coach is going to see that and be like, okay, can they do that like in a game? Can they do that like when it matters? Like those little highlight reels, those short form things, it's like that's not real. Like social media in general like isn't real. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I
that's a
love,
rabbit hole too.
I know. I love how you got into the like the college recruiting thing, because I think it is this belief that like, oh, like I have to reach out on social media, tag, blah, 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 do all this stuff. But the reality is like a coach, they don't really care about that stuff. Like they don't care how many likes you get on a training video. They would rather have you grab the phone, email them, go work out, like go do your thing. So I love that you went through that. Yeah.
And they don't care how many followers you have either. I mean, I think at this point, anyone can become a celebrity very easily.
Oh, anybody.
Like, I know so many people who have over 10,000 followers. Like, it's not that hard if you can get out volume of content. But like, I don't suggest you need to do that in your life. I think, people who are in charge of the algorithm want to keep you on the platform. Whether you're a business owner, a kid, or an athlete, they want to keep you on there to keep posting stuff and feeling like you need to constantly engage. And that just makes them more money as a company. So
again, it's like the robot analogy, like you're just a robot in their game. That's what it is. And if you're not aware of it, you will be an unconscious robot playing the game. Getting the post, oh, you got a like, dopamine hit. Oh, you know what I mean? It's just like, how can they get you to stay on the platform for as long as possible? And like, again, like just look externally all the time. So yeah, this
I love this
conversation,
discussion.
I love this too. I love this too. So I want to go back to when I said like social media isn't real. You're like, we'll go into a small rabbit hole with that statement. So what are your thoughts on social media isn't real?
I mean, man, this opens a can of worms. Okay, so from the young girl front, I think filters are a terrible thing. First of all,
Yep.
it's like, so it's just like morphing these beauty expectations of young women, and it's very dangerous. And I think the Kylie Jenners and all that, I think it's completely despicable. I think more girls are becoming more insecure because of all this stuff, and they feel they have to keep up with this filtered appearance. I mean, there's even one filter on Instagram, and I think TikTok too, where your skin is like completely clear, no blemishes, your lips are bigger, your eyebrows are a different shape, you have longer eyelashes. It's like very terrifying. And like for young girls to like get conditioned with that when their brains are still developing, when they get older, I wouldn't be surprised if they debate getting certain things done to their face. And like, that's like the scariest thing for me. And I've seen enough girls on a daily basis through my coaching, and I've overheard some conversations, and I really don't like what I hear on the beauty front of things. So that's been a big one in terms of social media being completely fake and it not helping our young girls.
What are, if you can recall, what are some of the things that you hear? Because I don't work with athletes in person, so you have a different perspective than I do.
I've just heard, like 18-year-old girls already having thoughts about getting like fillers and augmentations and that kind of stuff, to be totally transparent. And it's like crazy because when we were that age, like we didn't really know like what that was. And like now even like 12-year-old girls know what that stuff is. Like,
actually, even younger than that,
this will be a surprise to you. Last week, I had a 12-year-old athlete say to me that her English teacher has like lip fillers. And I'm like, how do you know? Like, you're like in middle school, like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I literally like freaked out. I was like, what the heck? So just like stuff like that, I'm like,
Mhm.
this is not good, because it's really like giving these girls these unrealistic expectations, and for young men too.
Yeah, it's both
It's
sides.
bad for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's bad both sides, but yeah, it is definitely social media affects girls in a lot of different ways than it does boys. And I'm just
Mhm.
trying to think like really, so these, expectations of beauty, like what long term is this, short term and long term, like what is this going to do to girls' confidence, their self-worth, their body image? Like I don't see a reality where like this skewed body image is going to have any positive effect. Like there's no way it's going to have any positive effect. I'm just thinking like what can we do like as adults, as leaders, as coaches? And I know like having the conversation is part of it, but even like as parents, like what can we do as adults, parents, coaches to help our kids navigate this? Because the reality is it's not going away. The filters and stuff, I mean, maybe eventually they'll get rid of the filters if they start to see, I don't know, but like it's social media and that stuff isn't going away. Like what, I guess, solutions do you see that parents can do, or coaches, or just anyone listening and kind of a leadership role that can help kids with this? Do you have an answer?
Yeah, definitely. So you're right. It's not going away. And I also think if we completely sheltered our kids from it,
Yeah.
that might not be the best idea either, because
Agreed.
eventually they're going to get
Mhm,
exposed to it, and
for
then
sure.
that could prove worse in the long run.
Yep.
So they are going to get exposed to it. And I think you're right. Having these conversations as coaches and as adults, and just reinforcing to young girls that they don't need to chase after these certain standards, because it's never going to be enough.
Never.
And I think like the body dysmorphia is very real. And people think, they can always like pick apart like one blemish or mistake, and you're never going to be happy like chasing what you think is like the perfect ideal.
Mhm.
And I think it's good to have that conversation with girls. And I've had a few conversations with girls about it, and they're really receptive to it. And they're like, no, you're right. Like that is a very dangerous road to go down. And it
Yeah.
is important for coaches, because I don't think teachers are talking about this in school.
Yeah,
Like,
probably not. Not that I
no,
know.
probably not. And I think it's okay to, just have the conversation if they bring it up, and just give your insight and just like a different side to everything. And just to really encourage girls, what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, like if you feel social media is really taking away from your life or making you very insecure, then you need to rethink how you're using it
Mhm.
and how much time you're spending on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the biggest thing then is like really just the education of it and the awareness around the dangers of it. And that starts with us. That starts with obviously us having the conversation. And two, like like that's why I think our work is so important, because the more confident girls are just as a human, as an athlete in their body, the less likely they'll be to give in to these social pressures and feel like they need a filter to feel good enough. So I really think it's a huge social pressure, but also I think it's a self-worth as well. Like if you really feel confident and worthy, then you're probably not going to be doing that stuff as much. So I think that's why our work is so important. And so I want to kind of get into some, I guess, tools and strategies that maybe you've used to help you mitigate your time on social media. Maybe some that you've helped your girls with. So, what are some different tools or strategies or reminders that you give yourself to help you kind of navigate all this?
That's a good question, because I think it's just kind of unfolded naturally. I just was starting to realize more and more that it wasn't really adding to my life like how I was using it before.
Yeah.
And even from like a business standpoint, I realize I don't need to be pushing as much volume out there because I'm better off just focusing on my direct community. And I had to ask myself the question, okay, if social media were to disappear tomorrow, would I be okay? And the
Oh,
answer is yes. And I think
absolutely.
yeah, honestly, I wouldn't be mad
Would be
about it.
better.
Like, and you would have to ask yourself, okay, would I be okay mentally, emotionally, for us business owners, financially? And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
we'd be fine. Like the world still spun before this was all introduced.
Yeah.
And it was fine. But I think if a lot of people get real with themselves and ask that question, they would be like, I like actually don't know like what I would do. So
Yeah.
I
And
think you
that's a
need to get
sign.
to a point where you'd like build your life, build your relationships, build yourself where you'd
Mhm.
be okay if it were to all crumble tomorrow.
I love that. I think that's like a great question to ask. And then too, like you said, build your life around, like if it, to the point where if it goes away, like you're fine, like it's all good. I love that.
I
And
love
like,
how you said you wouldn't be like mad about it either because
oh
like,
no,
yeah,
no,
I would not
I would be
care.
actually be, I would be, happy with it. And the reason I think the number one reason I would be happy with it is because of what it's doing to our kids. Like that's the number one reason. And then personally too, like I don't care to like the reason I have it is mainly, for business, but it's like I don't really need it. I don't love it. So personally, like I wouldn't care either. I think it would take some pressure, honestly, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and
So
people
yeah,
know
and
where to
then
find us, right?
yeah,
If people have your number or they know where you're at in California, it's like, I'm in
yeah,
Florida, you can find me. Like, come on
right.
down.
Right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. As far as like tools, and I know there's like the screen time things and stuff like that. And one tool that I read it in a book, and so I wanted to just try it and see what happened. It's called 1 Sec. And so the free version, you can not block one app, but when you open an app, so for example, I use it for Instagram, where I open Instagram, it'll open the app and it'll say like time to take a deep breath, and it'll be a 10 second. So 5 second inhale, 10 second exhale. And then it'll have a big button that says, I don't want to go to Instagram, or a small button that says, I want to go to Instagram. And so that way, number one, I'm making a conscious, like I'm actually taking a breath before I just go in. And number two, I'm making a conscious decision if I am going to go in. So two things, big things that I noticed from that, and I would recommend people just try it out. But two big things I noticed is that number one, for me, I just go to Instagram without even thinking about it. And so I'll click on it and then I'll see the thing pop up and I'm like, oh, I don't actually need to get on Instagram, and I'll just swipe out immediately, because it just has become like this habit of like picking up my phone and just getting on Instagram whenever I need a minute. You know what I mean? So I realized that I've been programmed to just click on Instagram. And then the second thing is huge that I got out of that is that when I actually do hit, I want to go to Instagram, I'm only there for like to either post something, or I'm there for something very, very, very specific, whether it's sending a DM to someone or going to someone's profile that I want to consume one of their pieces of content. So I don't ever, now that I have this thing, I don't scroll anymore. It's just, I'm there for a purpose. I'm in and I'm out. And
Mhm.
so I would recommend, like, I know there's probably multiple apps, but of the ones I've tried, this one I like the most. So it's called 1 Sec. So I wanted to give that like tangible tool that I think will kind of just bring your awareness and shift it a little bit differently.
That's brilliant. I'm glad you shared that, and it sounds really beneficial. And I think another one is the screen time limitations. I've seen a lot of success with that
Mhm.
with my
Yeah.
friends and with the girls that I coach. And I think when the girls that I coach actually like sit back and look how much screen time they've had, that's
Oh,
when they're like, oh wow, I need to make a change. It's a little bit crazy. And they're very disciplined with it and they follow through with the screen time limitations. And I think that's
yeah.
a really good tool as well.
Yeah. And two, like, one more tool that's a bit more difficult for most people is like we've talked about this so much, Erica, is like the social media fasts. So
Mhm.
like, whether it's on the weekend, I lately have been on the weekend switching over to my light phone. I don't know if I've showed you this, but on the weekends I'll switch over to my light phone, which it has no internet, just text. It's like an e-ink screen. But like, then if I don't do that, I'll at least delete social media off my phone. So I would encourage you guys, like, and the more this scares you, the more you should probably do it, to like have some, even if it's a half a day where you don't get on social media, or a full day on the weekend or something. Like, I would just try it. And like I said, especially if it scares you, then it's probably more of a sign that, hey, maybe I should try this out.
100%. I totally agree with that. And you'll find on the other side, you'll have a much more peaceful life. And that's like one thing I've really noticed with just like not going on as much, except to like post and be like really intentional, is like,
Yeah.
Life is peaceful. I feel more sure of myself. And, you talk about confidence all the time. I don't think you can't help but build confidence if you get off social media.
I totally,
because
that
you're
could be
focused on what you need
strategy
to
number
do.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Strategy
you're
number
just like focused on like your
one.
meaning and your purpose and creating something, and you're not constantly looking around or being stimulated. I mean, being stimulated all the time definitely is a disaster if you have high anxiety. So, there's something to be said about increasing your confidence by decreasing social media for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I would just encourage people to just try it for one day, like literally try it for one day, and you'll see how much time social media was taking and how much more time you have to go hang out with your friends, read a book, play with your dog, like whatever it is that you want to do, learn a new hobby, something like that. So yeah, I just encourage you guys listening to, and I hope parents, like I'm going to put this out, parents and athletes, because I think it's so valuable for both. But kind of last question I have, and then I'll let you go, is what advice do you have for parents? Because I know it's such a difficult conversation. So anything that you would say to parents on how they can kind of support their kids through it?
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, I think parents struggle because they don't want to nag their kid, and the kid tends to like push them away when they do that or like give advice. So maybe even just start off by listening to this podcast with them.
Yep.
And opening the discussion and asking them what they think and what they think are the positives of social media and what they think are the negatives. So I think just having a discussion instead of being like, you need to stop doing this.
Yeah.
I think that might be a good start. And also to even just lead by example. And this doesn't just go for parents, but also all adults and coaches who work with kids. Don't be on social media as much, to just kind of like model that behavior to kids. And, personally for me, I rarely post, like, I don't really post about like my personal life on social media too much. I don't think I have one bikini picture on my social media. You can scroll all the way down. I don't post anything like that. I see a lot of high school girls posting that stuff, which, I have my opinion on. But I think that adults need to model the behavior they want kids to have on social media.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like that's, I think the first strategy is like, if you're on your phone a lot, your kids, they're going to model you, especially, I mean, I would say at every age, but especially, that younger age. So model the behavior. And then I love what you said too, with like, just have a conversation, like a two-way conversation, asking your daughter, like, hey, what do you think the upsides are? What do you think the downsides are? Listening to this podcast and really just having a two-way conversation instead of like a one-way, just telling them. I think that's going to be really, really powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think that is probably the best place to start. And I think when you ask questions to kids and you say, well, how is this not helping your sport performance or your academics or your personal life or even your mental health? How is it not serving you? And when they can answer it themselves, they're like, oh, wow, this is maybe not good for me.
Yes. And yeah, it's crazy the difference in them answering it themselves versus you telling them, like complete black and white difference. Yeah. Cool. Love that, Erica. Thank you so much for coming on. Now that you are kind of, doing the more long form content, like where's the best place for people to be consuming that and connect with you?
I'm mainly hanging out on my YouTube channel with my podcast, and usually our episodes are anywhere from 40 to 90 minutes.
Mhm.
And I've just, I've really enjoyed going deep on topics and just having people on to talk about performance training and the latest research. So I try to keep it super like high educational content, and just really hoping that people make a change. And I've recently had an ACL injury researcher of 30 years on the podcast, and I was a little hesitant because he speaks in like very scientific jargon and like medical terms.
Mhm.
But what was funny about that episode was people liked that. And when they heard it broken down in such a deep and advanced way, it propelled people to do a strength training program. And
Yeah.
I was like, I've been trying to simplify this for years. And when Dr. Tim Hewitt comes on, okay, now everyone's ready to go. So it
That's
was cool. It
awesome.
was cool to see.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, make sure you guys go check it out. Like if you really want to have a transformation and learn something, get off Instagram and go check out Erica's YouTube, and don't get distracted by the other YouTube recommendations. All
Yeah. Facts.
right, Erica, thanks so much for coming on, and thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.